Let's get it going. We have Daniel Lumi here talking about privacy and blockchain. Why should you care? And improving privacy protocols to prevent hackers and criminals. Okay, this is very important, guys. So take notes and give it up for Daniel Lumi.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy.
A little bit about me first. My name is Daniel Lumi. I'm a researcher and consultant in Web3. I specialize in L2, ZK, privacy, and DAOs. So today we'll be talking about why should you care about privacy, some steps that we can use to improve privacy protocols to prevent hackers and criminals, and then finally, what steps can you take to protect your own privacy in Web3? So first of all, why privacy? And this is a very common thing that I hear also in people in crypto of like, but if I didn't do anything wrong, then why should I care, right? And I like what Edward Snowden said for this, where arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is like saying that you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. And here's some examples of where you'd want privacy, right? Maybe you get paid in crypto, and maybe you spend a stupid amount of money on a little JPEG, or you buy some porn. We all do it. Maybe that's something that would not give a credible signal to your boss about your capabilities as a worker. Right? Or maybe you buy something stupid, like Solana. I mean, AskRocket 69. Maybe you don't want everyone knowing that that's the thing that you invested your money into. Right? Or maybe you want to give to a polarizing cause. Like, I donated to Ukraine DAO, and as a fuck you to Putin, I actually did it publicly. I didn't hide myself. I'm pretty sure I'm never allowed to go to Russia again, right? I could be made a political terrorist or something. Or maybe you want to give to birth control or women's rights movements, or there's so many polarizing causes that maybe you should be able to do in public to give money to, right? Or like the worst case scenario of you're actually being abused or harassed. You don't want that person to be able to tell exactly where you are, what you spent your money on. That just dystopian. Or you use a service once. Maybe you go to a gas station. Should that gas station attendant know every single transaction you make, right? And would you give your bank statement to every single one of your friends? Like maybe your tax documents. Here, look through my history. That's a good idea. And the point of this is, like, if crypto reaches mainstream, we're really small right now, and hopefully it does, everyone will have access to all of your information, whether it's retailers or social media or banks or your employers or your friends or your partner. And again, this is a level of privacy that even we're not used to giving up, even though we're not great at it. So here's some things that we can do to improve privacy protocols to prevent hackers and criminals. And the sort of most common thing that I hear for, I'm an advocate of privacy blockchains, right? Is if we make money private, then how do we track terrorists and criminals, right? And first of all, don't do hacking. It's not a good thing. Like I don't recommend doing that. Please don't hack people. But the reality is, throughout most of human history, money was always private, right? You could spend your money as you wish. There's no one tracking you. And it wasn't until, it does not like Nixon, apparently. It wasn't until about 1960s that we essentially started doing mass surveillance programs in both finances as well as later in all of your online activity and your uses. And the internet is a good example where privacy is critical. Like, we have a protocol called HTTPS, which uses also TLS. Literally, the purpose of this protocol, maybe you've heard of crypto mixers, is to mix bits of information to hide what information you're actually sending. So the internet protocol is private by default. Like, no one can spy on you. And if we didn't have this, we couldn't have like credit card numbers. We couldn't pay for shit online. We couldn't have private Amazon accounts where maybe people don't want to show what you've been buying. There's some, don't look at my Amazon history. Or you couldn't send passwords over the internet, right? And so how do we currently regulate the internet? At the front end, not at the protocol level. So if someone puts a legal gun on eBay, we make sure eBay takes it down, or they get in a lot of trouble. Or maybe someone uploads some like illegal porn or schematics for nuclear weapons on Google, and Google indexes everything by default. They have to remove it or they get in trouble. And how do we regulate money today? Again, At the front end, like we regulate the banks, we regulate like if you buy a big ticket item like a house, they have to do some checks to make sure that you're not using illegal drug cartel money, right? Or if you give money to a sanctioned country or company, you're in trouble, right? The process of giving it is not where we regulate it. It's like, shit, now you gave money to terrorists, okay, you're going to jail, right? So where should we regulate crypto? At the front end, like it's the same thing. We can regulate exchanges. If we have some websites where you can buy drugs, you should probably get those people in trouble. Theoretically, I guess it depends on your stance on drugs, but guns, let's say, okay, that depends on the stance too. But, or you buy a house that's 10 million, maybe you should prove where that money came from. So here's some examples of how we can currently do to actually like prevent hackers or criminals from using the protocol. And to be clear, I really do think that the privacy protocols should not be regulated at a protocol level. But here's some things that we can do to make regulators not make them illegal, as well as some things that like at a front end actually might make sense to make sure that bad actors can't use them. So first of all, there's something called proof of exclusion of membership. Essentially, you can have these lists of OFAC individuals' addresses as well as like known hacker addresses. And essentially, you can make a ZK proof or a Merkle proof or a Kalk proof that essentially shows that your address is not one of the sanctioned addresses. And this works well because the way that privacy protocols work is the more time you leave your money there, the better privacy you get. So you do this at deposit and withdraw, which gives them time to update these lists. This is called proof of membership, right? Maybe your bank or your government certifies that this is a legal person, they paid their taxes, and then only people that have been certified can actually enter or exit these privacy protocols, right? Or this is something that a lot of like ZK protocols or privacy protocols already do. Essentially, you have something called a voluntary, a viewing key, where that's how you see your own transaction history. And if you get audited or there's a subpoena, you can actually show other people your transactions for like the government, for example. And this is actually a legal concept that has existed for a long time. It's called voluntary disclosure. This is how our governments work right now. You don't have to let someone in your house, like a police officer, unless you do something wrong or they suspect you. That's called voluntary disclosure. Of course, you cannot let them, but then you go to prison, so it's a bit on the line. You can institute daily deposit limits in privacy protocols, both at the general protocol level, but also individual address level. So essentially, it would make it very hard to launder, for example, 600 million, like Axie Infinity hack. You couldn't send that through in a day. Maybe it would take you weeks, and that gives them time to update those like proof of exclusion of membership lists to exclude you from using it. There's also, in both Europe and US, there's something called the travel rule, right? And in the US, it's essentially if you transfer over $10,000 a day, essentially that transaction needs to be reported, right? And we can do this also in privacy protocols where transactions less than 10,000 on a daily limit are private. And if some whale comes in and moves over 10K, that would automatically become a public transaction. And just to give an example of this, of like if you wanted to like stay under that private transaction limit and you want to launder or move $1 million, that would take you 100 days. Right? To us, $1 million is a lot, but for a cartel or North Korea or a hacker, that's nothing. Right? So it would take a really long time to move money through this. And again, it gives time for the privacy protocols to actually update these lists that you're not allowed to use it. So now that we've hopefully improved privacy protocols a lot, or not, here's some steps that you can take to actually protect your own personal privacy in Web3. And essentially there's three main issues, really two and then a side note, in blockchains right now, which is first of all blockchains are public, or most blockchains are public. Another issue is something called RPC nodes, we'll go into that. And then because the blockchains are public, any of the nodes can view your swaps, for example, in the mempool, and then front run you and steal money from you. So we can also, that's a problem with privacy in blockchains. So how do we protect our privacy from RPCs? And so what is an RPC? Essentially, in any blockchain, for us to view our current balance or to make a transaction, we essentially need to download the entire history of the blockchain. We need to see what our balance is, right? And we also, to make a transaction, we need an open channel with the transaction history. And you can run a full node at home where essentially it does this. It downloads, it executes everything, and then you can make transactions. But the reality is, most of us are not going to do that, right? So there's some providers like Infura that provide something called a RPC interface, so a remote procedure call, where you can essentially query for your data or send a transaction through them. And the problem with RPCs is essentially they see your IP address and they see the wallets that you're using. So if you use an RPC, they know that this IP address belongs, like this wallet belongs to this IP address. And maybe you use MetaMask with many wallets. It'll essentially query all of those wallets at once, so then it also sees all of these wallets are related and owned by the same person, right? Also, on top of that, if you have the IP address, the government can get a subpoena for your IP, and then you actually tie that to you as an individual, your identity as well. So here's some current blockchain interfaces of RPCs and then beyond. So we have centralized RPCs like Infura or Alchemy, and this is kind of trust me bro mentality. They say they won't extract data from us, but yeah, we don't really know that. Of course, maybe they get in trouble if they do that, but we're just trusting in a supposedly trustless blockchain ecosystem. Then there's this new concept, and this cracks me up, called decentralized RPC. Apparently, it's the next great thing. It's going to make RPCs super fair. The problem is now anyone can run a node on this RPC, and every single one of those nodes can actually steal money or extract information from your accounts. That to me is actually worse than the centralized RPC where there's someone accountable. Then we have these things called VPNs. It's called a virtual private network. You can get these. It's like $3 a month. Essentially, it routes your request to somewhere else in the world. I would recommend using VPNs always for everything you do. But that's also a little bit of, trust me, bro. Like, it hides your IP address, but maybe the node operators aren't honest on a VPN. And regardless, like, all of your transactions or all of your wallet queries would still go through one IP. So again, the RPC could see all of these wallets are related. Then there's another, like a better version of a VPN. It's called a mixnet. And essentially think of this as Tor. I won't go into details in this, but essentially it routes your request multiple times. Essentially now your IP is still hidden, assuming, again, they're not malicious. But your addresses are, again, tied together, unless you keep changing it over and over again, like every time you make a query. There's also the possibility of having an RPC that uses something called fully homomorphic encryption, which is cool. It's super cool. Turns out it's really expensive to do these operations, though, so maybe in 10 years, 20 years, we'll have that solution, right? Or my preferred fix for this is something called a light client. And there's different kinds of light clients. This is a validating light client. This way, you essentially, instead of downloading the entire history, you literally just check your, the latest states. So what your current balance is, what your nonce is, and can you make these transactions? And this is actually the best solution, but it's going to take us some time to do this on Ethereum because we essentially need statelessness and ZK proofs on the base layer to do that. So the choice, the real only choice is run a full node. You'll make Vitalik very happy. You'll see him clap again, which is just fantastic seeing this in real life. But also full nodes leak your IP a little bit, so you should probably use a full node with a mixnet, essentially. So how do you actually use, use privacy protocols to protect your actual assets, right? And the first option is you can maybe use an exchange. Like if you want a new wallet that's not doxed, you can send the money to the exchange and then send it to another wallet. The reality, though, is the vast majority of exchanges don't shuffle addresses. So if you have, you send the money there and then it sends somewhere else, it's pretty obvious where it came from. So that doesn't really anonymize you unless you happen to have an exchange. I don't even know of any anymore. They used to, Coinbase used to do this, Kraken used to do this, but they don't anymore. Then you could use it, but that's not a good option, right? So we have something called privacy protocols, and essentially privacy protocols obfuscate the source, the recipient, and the amount of what you're sending. Depends a little on implementation, which parts it hides, maybe all. And essentially, it mixes the funds with other people's, and it essentially allows users to retain privacy in this protocol. And right now, the best way to do this is zero-knowledge proofs. I like ZK. There are other methods like Intel SGX, MPC, and FHE, but right now ZK is better. Maybe in 10, 20 years, FHE proven on a ZK circuit would be the ultimate solution. Right? So examples of privacy protocols, or how you could do this, is one is just alt layer ones, right? And you can build a privacy blockchain that essentially you can bridge funds to or from to try to obfuscate like the senders and the recipients of it, right? But the problem with this is any alt L1 consensus, right? Maybe they don't have enough nodes, someone maliciously acts, they can steal all your money, right? And they can just reveal your private information, right? This is why we build on Ethereum, decentralization. There's also massive issues with bridges. Just don't bridge cross-chain. That's long story short, not a good idea. Like maybe if you're sending USDC, vale, but not ETH or other assets, right? And there are some examples of privacy L1s that you can use today, ranging from SGX to ZK. I do have a speech on why bridges suck, right? Next generation of safer cross-chain bridges, why bridges suck, so you can watch that to get a better idea of why this is just a bad idea. We can also build on a blockchain something called a layer 2, and essentially it builds on top of one existing decentralized blockchain, and essentially this allows us to trustlessly bridge to and from that privacy layer without these cross-chain bridges. And at the same time, essentially it removes the consensus risk because you're relying on Ethereum security, right? And in this, instead of, like in this new privacy network, instead of using your public data, essentially you verify, or you prove something on your local computer, and then you send that to the network and it just verifies it instead of running the execution, right? A cool part of these is also you can batch transactions from L2 to L1 to essentially use Uniswap privately. Or some of the newer ones will allow a private state, which is a UTXO model in ZK, and a public state, which is a normal account-based model that Ethereum uses. And then you could deploy Uniswap on this layer as well. Again, a problem with this is still the same RPC issue we talked about. But then there is something called ZK Validium. Essentially, Validium allows you to store transaction data, like a roll-up, L2, to store transaction data somewhere else than on Ethereum. And essentially, if you store that data somewhere else, and you don't show anyone that data, it's private, right? Not really, though, because whoever's storing that data can reveal that data at any point, or just withhold the data from you making a transaction, and then all of a sudden they can like ransom you for money, right? So this kind of works. This might be good for essentially enterprise use cases where the enterprise runs their own data availability storage solution, and then they're in charge of the private data. I do have both of those last ones were essentially roll-ups, L2s. I had a panel at ETH Gathering where we talked a lot more about the security issues of L2s as well. They have their own issues. It's better than cross-chain, but it's a complicated subject. This is a newer concept, which is called, like, you can essentially use account abstraction with a dark pool or mixer contract to essentially have a private account directly on Ethereum or on L1. And essentially, you can use like a zero-knowledge proof with account abstraction where you can hide the owners, that who actually owns this account. And then you can create a ZK proof showing that I have the private key. And at that point, the smart contract wallet essentially makes a transaction without anyone knowing who the signer is, right? So you have a private account, no one knows who the owner is. But the problem is like, cool, we have a private account, but how do you actually move money in and out of there without using Coinbase or, you know, something else? So essentially we can have a mixer or something called a dark pool contract, which is essentially an escrow contract. Let's say 1,000 people send their 0.1 ETH, and then maybe X amount of days later it sends them all out at the same time. And this way you're hiding in a pool of 1,000 people and you don't know whose account this is, right? The transactions are still public on Ethereum, but it's much harder to find the essentially who owns it. Then there's something also that Vitalik's been talking about, which is called native stealth addresses. I won't go too much into this, but the idea is essentially you generate a new address every single time that you send funds, and someone can send you funds without you generating that address. A bit complicated, but coming soon TM. This works for normal assets and NFTs, by the way, so you can hold an NFT and actually put it on your Twitter without burning what account you used it from. All of these solutions above, just about, use some form of ZK or another. ZK is essentially PhD level mathematics that very few of us were super excited about for many years. Now people are asking about it. It's not easy to explain, so I made essentially a ZK 101 speech that's a mathless explanation of how ZK works. Here's, for all of those above privacy protocols, how can you actually use it? There are some things that you actually need to keep in mind to stay private within them, right? So the important thing to understand is in a privacy protocol, you're essentially playing a game of mathematical probability, right? You're just trying to make it much harder to find you. There's no way to permanently hide you with no one ever being able to find you, right? And the most important part for that is called an anonymity set or privacy set. And essentially, the more people that use this protocol, the less likely you are to be found, right? So if you bridge their 1 ETH, maybe there's 1,000 other people that bridge their 1 ETH, you're hiding in that crowd. And maybe you send 0.1 ETH, all of a sudden that privacy pool gets even bigger. Lots of people might have the ability to send 0.1 ETH. If you send their very large amounts, though, like 60 ETH, I don't know how many people have that, so you're whittling down your privacy set, essentially. Also, don't send their idiosyncratic amounts. Like, you should send 0.1 or 1. Don't send their 0.0023857, blah, 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 because maybe one person only sent that amount, so it's pretty obvious who has that. Deposit time is also very important, because essentially, the longer you leave their funds, maybe you send there, again, 1 ETH, as time goes on, more and more people send their 1 ETH or more. So the more time you wait, it just gets exponentially harder to the point that maybe a supercomputer can't even try to guesstimate who you were. And a short wait time is not good. An example of this is the Ronin Bridge hack. It was they sent 600 or 300 million through Tornado and then withdrew it 1 day later. Not that many people have 300 million lying around or in Tornado, so we know who it was. It was North Korea, by the way. But some privacy protocols let you do trading and transactions within the protocol itself. So this increases the anonymity set by a lot. So maybe you send 1 ETH, you traded it to DAI, now you have 2,000 DAI, and the more trades and transactions that happen in the protocol, it just gets really hard to figure out whose money this might be. And this is the last kind of half part about privacy or issues of privacy in blockchain, where I don't like MEV. I talk to MEV folks all the time. I'm like, please give me a good form of front running or sandwiching. And they're like, no, it's good. I'm like, yeah, but give me an example. And they just can't, other than just-in-time liquidity, but that's bad for LP rewards. So how can you trade on a blockchain without these nodes stealing money from you when you're doing swaps? So we can actually use something called threshold cryptography with a small ZK proof that I won't go into. And essentially, this inserts, let's say you're doing a swap on Uniswap. Essentially, you put an encrypted transaction, it gets included in the blockchain, and it's only revealed in block n+1, so the next block. So at that point, they can't front run you because they didn't know what kind of transaction it actually was, so it's too late. They can back run you, but that's healthy forms of MEV. This also prevents all censorship, right? Maybe someone did a Tornado Cash transaction, but now it's encrypted, and it was already included. Too bad this transaction happened now. So it just prevents any form of censorship as well. Tornado Cash is maybe not the best example, because that was going against sanctions, but there are other examples where you don't want to be censored, or you shouldn't be. You can read about threshold cryptography or just how we implement these in the mempool level at those links, both Osmosis and Ethereum. There's a research proposal on Ethereum as well. Hopefully we can, even if we can't implement this on L1 level, hopefully we can implement this type of new transaction on L2s. Thanks for caring about your privacy on behalf of everyone. Like, it's like we complain about wanting to be private and then we're like, damn it, Facebook, but how much do you really do about it, right? And it's really important to, like really easy to get complacent and kind of forget about it, but it's really important to keep paying attention to it because otherwise no change is gonna happen, right? And if you don't have the time yourself to maybe go and protest every day, understandable, give money to crypto advocacy groups like Electronic Freedom Frontier or Coin Center or Blockchain Association. They'll fight on your behalf. Money matters in this world, so if you really care about privacy, like give to organizations that will fight on your behalf for it. And you can find me on Twitter at ZKLumi, and that's it, thank you. I see you're doing this, but I don't know what that means.
Look at the screen. Below. On the floor, yeah.
Okay, questions? It just says ETH Barcelona right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's someone there?
Okay, questions. Do we need to give a mic for the, yeah, okay, cool.
No, I'm the MC.
Hi, so great presentation.
She's the one running. Are you Mark?
Has a wealth of information in it.
Oh my God, okay.
So I was wondering, is there any way we can get the presentation? Because I missed most of the codes. Any way we can get the presentation or a link to it or something like that?
Yeah, I can put that up. I guess follow me on Twitter and either I'll put it up, this is actually an updated speech from my old one that I did like 8 months ago, and it's quite different, so either I'll re-record it or just share the slides directly.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Lumi. Number one, thank you. Excellent presentation, per usual. I guess I have just 2 questions. If we can revert back to the idea of, let's say, like dedicated nodes, one being a light, one being a full, do you have a preference or do you have any thoughts between hardware versus cloud? Because I think that could mean something when it comes to privacy. And then the second question was when you made mention of the, which I have to do more research, the AA dark pool, you had a little note that there are RPC issues. I was wondering if you could speak on that just a little bit as well.
Yeah, so any transaction, whether it's going through RPC or not, maybe they see a request came from your IP address, it's triggering this dark pool. Okay, we know this address used this dark pool, right? Or this IP address and this address. The address is obvious, but the IP address as well, right? So again, maybe use Tornado. Don't recommend it right now. I do wish we could, but now they know you broke the sanctions and they can get a subpoena and get your actual address information. What was the second part of that? Oh, the full nodes in cloud, yeah. Yeah, so I obviously prefer hardware. The more we can get like at-home nodes going around the world, the more decentralized the protocol becomes, the harder it's to attack it. From a privacy point of view, like some technologies like HTTP, TPS, or TLS actually help protect those nodes in a cloud from being spied on. But again, nodes also release IP. So maybe you could track down, okay, this node is in this data center, like either the data center provider or the government can go kick your box until it's broken, you know. Yeah. There is also down here to use a ENS and share it as a username on social media. How do you recommend to protect privacy there? That's a complicated one because if you already registered with a name that you like, it's linked to you. It's linked to your account that you registered it from. And now maybe you want to, like the way you should do it is make a new address using one of these privacy protocols so it's no one knows whose address this is or where the money came from at least. And then register the ENS there. And at that point, like, okay, they see essentially a useless account. Right? Right now, if you already have a username you like, maybe you dox your address, there's some sensitive things in there like you bought Solana. It's hard to change it now because like you could always change which address it belongs to or pretend to sell it to yourself on OpenSea, but it's a lot more linked than if you just did it from the scratch. Any other questions?
I think we're good.
Cool.
All right.